My name is Greg Ryder. I am a musician. Miss D, I don't know what I'm going to be when I grow up, but I'm going to be a millionaire. She said, oh, really? She said, how do you plan on doing that? I was actually driving home and I actually got into a 6-car crash. Almost a near-death experience or whatever. Like, it gets you thinking about...
It really went downhill.
And I'd scream. And I'd scream, pretend I was on a roller coaster. And I was like, oh, I'm sorry. I was on a roller coaster moment there. I'm on my computer, like, creating something.
We need sponsors.
I let a $5 palm reader dictate my life. This is actually not what you're meant to be doing with your life. This is a stepping stone to something way bigger. And I was like, don't say that. Why are you saying that?
It's a
Oh, wow.
40.
See, this is the whole untold story.
Yeah.
We've been keeping this secret for a long time. And I remember, like, I kept looking at him like, dude, stop looking at me. Like, I'm going to punch you. I'm in the window with my hood up and I'm crying. Cigarette hanging in my mouth. And I was like, what are you doing, dude? You're killing yourself. Nashville is just like, this is what people are talking about. One of the most talented musicians in the world.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to a new podcast. My name is JJ Vola. Alongside here is my co-host, Cal Vola. Welcome to What Do You Do podcast. Today, we are joined by Mr. Greg Ryder. Greg, thank you so much for being part of our podcast. Tell everybody who you are and a brief description of what you do.
Absolutely. So, yes, my name is Greg Ryder. I am a musician, also a speaker, entertainer. Interesting way of getting into music, and I love to perform, love to entertain, and make people laugh and smile. That's what I like to do.
Wow, awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. And let's take it back to some of your younger years. What were some of your first jobs? Walk us down memory lane of Mr. Greg Ryder.
Yeah. For me, going back to high school, I think I was always just a very, confused kid. Definitely didn't know how to plan for myself of what I wanted to do after high school. I think for me, it was always just a lot of, I felt like everyone had a plan around me except for myself. And I remember the story in grade 10. I was in exercise science class, and one of my favorite teachers, Miss D'Aloisio, she always, we ended the class in a new way. And she said to me, she went around and she wanted to know what everyone was doing after high school and what their plans were. And so I remember, like, she walked around and she was like, okay, raise your hand. So everyone put their hand up. And like me, I was always the class clown, trying to find ways to like make people laugh and think of the next thing to do. So like when she didn't see my hand go up, she was like, okay, what's going on? Greg. And like, I'm usually like hand up, and I was hitting the back of the class, and I was like, I'm not saying anything because I didn't have anything to say. I had no funny remarks. So a bunch of kids answer or whatever. And then she comes back and she goes, Greg, your hand's not up. What do you want to do after high school? And I remember just looking at her and being like, I have no clue. And the class started to laugh around me, and they snickered. And I was like, okay, I need to come up with something clever. So I said, Miss D, I don't know what I'm going to be when I grow up, but I'm going to be a millionaire. She said, oh, really? And I said, yeah. She said, how do you plan on doing that? I said, I have no clue yet. Entertaining people, maybe making people laugh, whatever. And the class started to laugh again. And then Miss D said, no, she said, Greg, if anyone else would have said that in the class, I would not have believed them. But like you saying it, like, I don't know what you're going to end up doing with your life, but when you find out what you're meant to do, you're going to be amazing at it. And that story, the first time I ever heard that was from a teacher. And when she said that to me, like, that was the first time I ever thought of myself as more than just a jock, more than just a guy that played sports. I felt like I had a little bit different of a unique journey ahead of me, and I had to go and kind of figure it out. So that kind of put me on to my whole path. And then the next day I went to a guidance counselor, and I was so excited to like figure out what I was going to do after high school. And I remember she was like, what are your interests? And I was like, my interests are playing sports, talking about sports, and being on camera. And she was like, okay, doesn't give me much to work with. But she's like, have you ever thought about being a sports broadcaster? And I was like, that's kind of cool, because what I didn't tell her was every morning I'd get up and I'd get a bowl of cereal and I'd sit in front of TSN or The Score or Sportsnet, and I just watch the highlight reels. It's my favorite thing to do every morning. And I was like, that'd be cool to do like the voiceovers and the highlight packs. And I actually, she started looking into schools, And then I remember going out to like my peers in, in high school and be like, yeah, I think I'm going to be a sports broadcaster. And everyone being like, oh my God, I can see that. And I was like, yeah, okay, perfect. Okay, that's what I'm going to do. And it was just like, that was me. Like,
Yeah.
I feel like I always was just like, oh, if I got approval from my peers, this is perfect. And then, I got accepted to Niagara College and started kind of going off on that whole thing and went to school for sports broadcasting.
How long was that course?
3 years.
3 years. Okay.
Yeah, advanced diploma.
Did you complete it?
I did.
Okay.
Yeah, I completed it.
Yeah.
And yeah.
How was that experience? So, I mean, we all go to college, we all have a good time, we all party, all that kind of stuff, and obviously schooling is part of it, but also the social dynamics and whatnot. How was your experience in college?
Yeah, in college. So like for me, like, yeah, my reputation in high school was a class clown, like always like the guy that never took life too serious. And, just kind of always just goofing around. And that definitely followed me into college. I had the dream of being a sports broadcaster. Like I saw myself on TSN or something like that. So I went into school with this big dream. I think when I got there, I remember I just kind of just was the person that was in high school. I showed up in this cowboy hat and this country hat, and I just knew like I was here to just be liked by everyone. I was like, I just wanna have a good time. And yeah, so I think for me, it was like I was focused on school in the first year, but I was also playing college volleyball. I got scouted to play college volleyball. I made the team. So, and I was meeting new people and that kind of stuff. So like my focus is more on just like having a good time, making new friends, and playing college volleyball. And like I definitely feel that school was not my number one priority.
Hmm. Okay. Okay.
Mhm.
I remember you used to room with like Mike DiCarlo back in the
Yeah,
day. You guys used to throw some pretty good parties and
yeah.
whatnot. And I went to school and you party, you have fun, all that kind of stuff, and you kind of get away from like the studies and whatnot. So, what did you take away from that course when you were at Niagara?
I just think I just think you have to know exactly what you really want to do. Like you have to buy in. And I remember my radio teacher always being like, if you don't want to do this 100%, if you're not completely in, there's the door. Like, and I remember I'd look at the door like 10 times per class. I was like, oh crap. He's like, if you don't want to do this, because like it's not gonna be easy. You might have to go up to a faraway town and do the weather or like, do that kind of stuff. Like you're gonna have to like grind and struggle. So if you don't want to do this, this is not for you, and you're not willing to do that, then there's the door.
Mhm.
And I remember like I just was just like, yeah, TSN would be cool, but am I willing to do all the things that lead up to TSN? You don't come out of school and get a TSN job. Like you've got to climb the ranks for years. And I don't think I really wanted to do that. I wasn't willing to struggle on that kind of struggle to get there. So I really started to separate myself from sports broadcasting in like the second year, and we had to actually pick more of a stream. So there was presentation, there was TV production, and there was film. So you can major in one of the three. Obviously, I chose presentation. That was like radio broadcasting, TV broadcasting. So I chose that route, but I just realized that like, yeah, I didn't really love the struggle. And I think for me, like now being later in life, I realized that everything you're going to struggle for whatever you do in this life. It's like, what are you willing to struggle for?
Mhm.
And it's like, that's what you have. That's your true love is the thing that you're willing to struggle through.
It's almost a thing that you'll do for free. Like, this
Mhm.
podcast has been incredible, like a lot of fun, all that. You're learning so much. But like,
Yeah.
what are the things that you'll do in your life pretty much for free? But hopefully, you get paid for it and all that kind of stuff. And eventually you get so good at it that you become the best
Mhm.
at it. And people are just kind of knocking on the door with money and whatnot. So
Yeah.
you went to school for broadcasting, you completed it, you graduated.
Mhm.
What happens next?
Yeah, so I did the program was 2.5 years, like 3 years to graduate. In the final semester, we had to do an internship. So for me, a lot of the students in my class, like they knew they wanted to be broadcasters. Like this was their dream ever since a young age, and they're like they wanted it. So a lot of these a lot of my peers already had like these internships lined up for years. Like they're already working at a radio station or a TV station. So everyone had their where they wanted to go. And me, they're like, Greg, where are you going to do your internship? And I was like, oh man, I don't know. I haven't figured it out yet. I'm going to be a bartender up in Muskoka because I was 21 years old and I was like, I'm going to enjoy my summer. Like I don't care about an internship. And they're like, what? Like, man, like you got to find what you're going to do for the rest of your life. I'm like, no, I'm good. I'm going to enjoy myself. And so I actually went up to Muskoka to be a bartender. And if we didn't have a internship by the time we got back to school in September, we had to write this 10,000 word essay on the topic of the teacher's choice. So all summer, I'm not worried about it. I'm bartending. I'm having the best summer of my life, and it was at a little resort up in Delawana and Honey Harbor, and I got to live on this resort with a whole bunch of bartenders and servers, and it was the best summer of my life. Like still to this day, I look back and it's like, man, that was fun. And I had to find an internship. And on the last week, as I was bartending, this couple walked into the bar and sat down, started chatting, started talking about life. And I said, "So what do you do?"
Yeah. See how that question comes up sometimes?
Because that's a bartender question. It's like, what do you do?
Yeah.
And it's just like, honestly, I don't really like. I gotta kind of talk to you because you're at the bar and you're the only customer. So I'm not gonna sit back to just cleaning glassware because I hated cleaning glassware. So I like talking to people. So we started talking. He's like, I'm actually a TV producer in Toronto. And I was like, okay, cool. I got a funny thing to ask you. He goes, okay. He goes, so I'm in school for sports broadcasting and I actually need an internship. Like, or else I have to write an essay and I do not want to write an essay. And he's
That's
like,
the first red flag for that guy.
And he's like, okay. I'm like, what's the chances you guys need an internship at your production studio? He's like, I don't know. Like probably a pretty good chance. Like you're gonna work for free. I was like, yeah, I'm gonna literally. You have 3 months to boss me around. Like I just need an internship, dude. And he's like, okay, like I'll get back to you on that. Like here's my number. We'll chat. That whole weekend, him and his girlfriend like followed me around the resort. We became such good friends. Like everywhere I was bartending, he was sitting there. So by the end, they had this big party at their room at the end of the weekend, and we partied. And he's like, by the way, he's like, you're 100% coming to work for me. I was like, yes. So he's like, we'll figure out the details in September. So I was so pumped. It was like the last week. I'm going back to Niagara College with this internship, and I'm like, yes, not doing the essay. So yeah, finished up schooling, and then started going to moved back home to Waterdown to my parents' house after college, and I started to commute from Waterdown to Etobicoke, where Redfish Entertainment was.
And sorry, just to go back before we go on to the next topic, what out of that course, because it was a 3-year course, what can someone expect to learn from that course that you took?
So yeah, so for broadcasting, it's a lot of like news stories. It's like to be a reporter. So how to talk on camera, how to do radio broadcasting, how to kind of create your own radio show. We would do more of a focus on creating your own news stories. So one thing when I was trying to balance, volleyball and stuff like that, we'd have to go around the community and we'd rent this huge camera and microphones, and we'd actually go and set up a news story. So we'd find something that we wanted to pick a news story on. So we had to do a lot of those throughout the year. And yeah, we'd find a story that was interesting, and then we'd record someone, we'd do some B-roll, we'd do a little like talk to the camera and stuff like that, and then we edit it up. We have to do this all by ourselves, and then we'd have to like submit it for grade. So it was a lot of getting yourself comfortable in front of cameras, in front of radio, coming up with news stories and that kind of stuff.
Cool.
Yeah.
And one person would be like, maybe the producer. One person would be holding the camera and like all that kind of stuff. Like,
yep.
And you would typically try and be in front of the camera because that's where like you really like wanted to be and whatnot.
Yeah.
So, okay, cool.
In the beginning though, we had to do all that ourselves. So we'd have to actually just set up on the tripod, and we'd have to like learn how to make sure we're in frame and stuff like that. So like we'd learn how to do it by ourselves. And then once you started to major in it, then you could actually link up with a TV production major, and then you'd go out together and you'd kind of like walk around, and that made it so much easier because that took all the harder part, that the parts that I didn't enjoy out of it, and I could just be on camera.
Okay.
Yeah.
Unreal. And the internship, so I guess going forward now, the internships, they're unpaid.
Yeah.
Can they be paid as well, or
You can get paid after. You can
Okay.
get if you decide to stay with the company, if they offer you a job. But yeah, it's just 3 months unpaid. It's kind of for you to kind of get your feet wet in the industry and kind of see if it's something that you want to continue on doing, or just kind of staying in the industry.
Awesome. Cool.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so Redfish Productions is what it's called. That's
Yeah.
who you interned at?
Yeah, Redfish Entertainment, and it was a production studio, and they did a lot of commercials. So they actually a lot of commercials and a production. So they did Cash Cab. They were the production studio for Cash Cab, and that guy walked in one day when I was walking there, and I was like, "You look familiar." They did the Humble and Fred podcast. Humble and Fred was this huge radio show back in the day. That these guys were massive, and they quit mainstream radio. They did the Humble and Fred show, and they came and actually did a podcast in their studio as well. It's just so I was just there. I was like a fly on the wall, and I just got to kind of take it all in, and it was really cool. They never really had a plan for me, or like because it was so sudden that they were just like, we're just going to bring this kid in and just have an unpaid intern. And, they set me up at the front and right by the coffee machine. So I knew that's what my role was.
Yeah.
I mastered the pot of coffee.
Yeah.
And
Jesus.
so I did a lot of different things, but
Yeah. What else did you do there? Like anything specifically that stands out that you would do for them other than grabbing coffee and making sure that people are.
it was more of just
Really?
about being just being a personable person, as guests walked in or something. If they were looking, if they were doing one of the podcast shows, or if they were coming in to talk about a new commercial or a new show that they were pitching, it was more about just being like a friendly face when people walked up. Hey, can I get you a cup of coffee? Can I show you around? Here's the waiting room. It was just kind of just taking the tour around the studio and stuff like that, just so the bigger bosses didn't have to always come out and do that stuff. So I was more of just kind of like, I was a greeter, receptionist, but also like just kind of helping with the day-to-day operations and kind of helping the place run smoothly.
So glad you're not doing it still today. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Now walk us through after college. You say you were coming back, moved back home.
Yeah.
To Waterdown. And what was the next steps after that?
Yeah, so the internship was a massive a step in my life. Like after 2 months of being there, I actually was driving home from the internship, and I still remember the day. It was a hot summer day or whatever. It was like pretty warm out, and I was actually driving home, and I actually got into a 6-car crash on the way home from that internship. And it was a domino effect. Like I didn't get hurt, I didn't get injured, but I remember like I was on the 403, and a girl got cut off. So a girl actually got cut off in front of me, and I take this drive every day. So like for me, it was like I kind of looked ahead and I saw brake lights coming over the hill, close to Berloque in over up there. So around the time I get home, 3:34, it was always traffic. So I was coming up over the hill, over this little hill, and I was kind of like fiddling with the radio, and I was like trying to find a good station or whatever, because I knew like traffic was coming up. So as I'm fiddling with the radio, I was like there, and I saw brake lights ahead, and I was like started tapping on my brakes, and then like as soon as like I looked up again, I was like, man, that car's not slowing down. That car stopped, and I slammed on my brakes as fast as I possibly could and started sliding. My car started sliding into the back of this car, and I slid about maybe 20 feet into the back of this car. And I remember like everything went slow motion. And I remember just like grabbing on the steering wheel with like both hands. And at the last second, I churned the steering wheel left, and it kind of churned my car. And I smoked like the front headlight into the back of this car. And airbag deployed in my face. And then I kind of came to a couple seconds later, and my, it was black smoke like kind of covering like the outside of the car. And my first initial thought was like, my car is going to get on fire. So I jumped out and I was standing on the side of the road, looking back at my car. It was a complete write off. Like the front was squished right into the front. And I was definitely in shock. And I kind of like, a bunch of people came over to me and were just like, because it was a 6-car kind of crash. Like everyone kind of crashed into each other. So this person walked up to me and they're like, "Are you okay?" And I was like, yeah, I'm good. Like, what happened? Like, what's going on right now? And they're like, yeah, some lady got cut off and a bunch of people crashed into her. And it was a really like scary time because like I remember just everything was flashing through. Like I was sitting there, I was sitting on the guardrail waiting for the tow truck to come, and looking back at this wrecked car, and all I could think about was my future. All I could think about was like if I died. And I don't know if you guys have ever felt that, but like almost a near death experience or whatever, like it gets you thinking about what really matters in your life. And I kept thinking about my funeral. I kept thinking about like if I died, who would come? Who would have came to my funeral? What would they have said? Like how would I be remembered? And I realized in that moment that I would be remembered for someone that was a party animal, someone that was drunk most weekends, someone that never had control of their lives, never could figure out what they wanted to do with their life. And answering that question in my head took me to a whole new place. It made me so depressed, and I laid in bed for the next 4 days. I didn't go into work, didn't go into the internship. I just laid in a dark room for 4 days, contemplating everything, contemplating my whole life, feeling like I just wasted 3 years of my life going to school. I'm a complete failure. I'm never going to amount to anything in my life. And being really scared. That was the first time I ever felt like true anxiety and in a rock bottom moment. And I remember my mom coming down after 4 days of me lying in bed, and she was like, "Greg, like, I know you're not doing well right now, but she's like, you got to finish this." She's like, "You got to finish what you started." She's like, "Go finish the internship, and then you can figure out what you want to do with your life after. But like, just don't give up on this because you worked hard. Go graduate. Get the graduation, get your diploma, and then you can move on." And that was some really good advice. And my mom said that she'll drive me into work. She'll drive me into Mississauga, and then I'd get my boss to come pick me up, and he could take me the other half in, whatever. So that next day, we got up. I'm completely groggy, like out of it, do not want to go. But I said to the boss, I'm like, "Yeah, I'm coming in today." And so that first day we drove in, and I was going to get picked up at a Starbucks in Indigo. And I remember Rob was going to come pick me up, and my mom dropped me off at the Starbucks. I went in, grabbed a cup of coffee. I was sitting at the windowsill, like looking out into the parking lot. And I was so sick of thinking. I was so tired of thinking. And I'm like, I can't do this anymore, man. Like, I took my coffee and I walked over to Indigo, and I started browsing through like the book section and the aisles and stuff like that. And I found myself in a section that I've never been in before. And it was like the self-help section. And I remember looking at all these different covers, and I still remember the one book. It was a bright yellow and blue book, and it was glowing. It just felt like I could read it from across the library, across the bookstore, and it was How to Stop Worrying and Start Living by Dale Carnegie. I picked it up and I read the back of it, and I was blown away. I was like, everything I was feeling in the last 3-4 days was worry. It was making me sick to my stomach. It was making me feel these horrible feelings. And I'm like, this is what's happening to me right now. Like, I'm so worried about the future. And I picked that book up, and man, like, I read that book from start to finish in about 2 days. And it just completely opened my brain up to like worry and personal development and trying to figure out what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. And it felt like I was born again. It felt like I was just like getting a whole new chance at life, and I had to kind of recreate myself. And like that's what happened to me after college. It was just like, okay, let's pretend all that college stuff didn't happen. We don't want to do that. Now let's go to the next part. Let's figure out what I'm really meant to do in this world.
Mhm. God dang. Okay. Yeah, that's a lot. I remember the car crash. Like, we obviously grew up together, went to high school together, all that kind of stuff. And that was a huge thing, like even stuff like that happens. And yeah, when you see your life kind of flash before your eyes and like, you're like, man, like you start to think about things that you don't normally think about, especially that young, when you're
Mhm.
that young, like,
Yeah.
dealing with like that depression, all that kind of stuff. And I've been there too, where I can't get out of bed and all that kind of stuff. And you're like, man, like what is going on in these brains that's, making us feel that way. So yeah, no, that's super hard time for you. And now you're through that now. You read that book. I haven't read that book yet, but definitely on the list. So then after reading that book, what happened next, Greg?
Met you.
Yeah, shit. It really went downhill.
We met. We met a couple weeks, I think, after the internship. And my first love was always public speaking. I loved, like, when in elementary school, when I knew it was speaking season, all the kids would hide their faces, and I was like, yes, like this is what I love. I loved like picking a topic and doing research on it, and then coming up with like a humorous speech. Me and my mom is my favorite thing. Me and my mom did. Like, my mom loved speech season because she was like, we'd come home and we'd go to the library together. We'd work on a topic, and then she would actually help me write jokes for the speech, and it was so much fun. And in grade 5, I won for my class, and then I just started getting better and better throughout the years. And in grade 8, I won for my school, and then I went to the championships for all the schools in the area. I won that, and then I went to the Southern Ontario speaking finals, and I came 4th out of like 8 people, and everyone was doing like speeches on like the Big Bang Theory and like astronomy. I did a speech on roller coasters, and I went up, and I would always tease my hair before each performance, and I pretend like it was getting blown by the wind. So imagine this kid in grade 8 walking up, and I'd go to the front of the podium, and I look at all the people, whatever, it's like waiting for me to start, and I'd go, ah, and I'd scream, pretend I was on a roller coaster, and I was like, oh, I'm sorry. I was on a roller coaster moment there. And I'd dive into the speech. But 2 years after that, people would come out to me like, dude, I still remember the opening of your speech. Like, no one gets on stage and just yells.
Yeah.
So I love public speaking.
Sure.
And after this car crash, I realized I'm just like, man, I love to be in front of people. I love to speak. So I remember I was sitting at my grandparents, my grandma's house one day, and we were watching Oprah. And it was just me and my grandma sitting there. And I remember Tony Robbins came up on stage. And I remember like just the way he took control of a room. Like, when he walked on, people's eyes just went, and they were just locked into every word he said. And I turned to my grandma and I said to her, that's what I want to do. And she's like, I can see that. I can see you being that. And I was like, that just seems so cool. Like, being able to walk on stage and just having people just be like, by your words. And after that, I was like, I want to be a motivational speaker. Like, that'd be really cool. But the one thing is that I never felt I had a story. I never felt like, because at that point, the car crash didn't seem like a big deal for me. I bottled that up, and I pushed it so far down because I didn't get injured. Because I didn't get injured and because I didn't get hurt, I felt that it was no big deal. But years down the road, a lot of work later and a lot of digging into my life and realizing that was a massive turning point in my life. Like, that was a life-altering moment. You don't have to get, into a massive injury to do that. Like, it's your brain that got shocked. And at first I didn't think I had a story. And that's when, we met at the gym, and everyone was doing their own thing. Everyone was like out in university. And I felt like it was me and you, like everyone else was away doing their thing.
I dropped out of college. That's why I was back. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we were the only ones home in like Waterdown at that point. All of our friends were in university doing their thing. And me and Cal are back in hometown of Waterdown. Started seeing him every day at the gym. And, we would just kind of like, starts with a head nod. What's up? And then more and more and more. And then by the end of it, we're out in the parking lot, just
Packing a chew.
packing a chew, hanging out, talking about life.
Yeah.
And we started talking about what we wanted to do with our lives. And you were the first entrepreneur I ever met. I still remember that. You were the first person that I ever met was doing their own idea and their own thing. And I was like, man, that's cool. Like, it was a whole new way of thinking. And you start talking about entrepreneurship, and I was like, that sounds so cool to have an idea or a product that you're selling. Like you're doing this, right? And we started talking, and we got in a conversation about motivational speaking. And I was like, man, like, I want to get into motivational speaking. Like, I want to speak about things. And then you told me that you've always wanted to have your own apparel line,
Like
your own clothing line.
A lifestyle brand or like
Yeah.
something like that. Like I think
Yeah.
everybody wants.
And he already
when they're
had the
16.
name. He already had the name branded, Motive, and it was a car part company at that time. And we were just started talking. We're like, man, like, why don't we just come together on this and create this motivational clothing line? And we're like, yes. And then we were both gung ho about it. Cal cleared out your parents' basement. We created this office down the basement, and every day we came to work. Yeah. We came to work. We had no idea what we were doing. I sat across from you, and I just be like, I'm on my computer, like creating something.
We need sponsors. We need money.
We had no plan.
Yeah.
But it felt like we were working on something big, and that it just felt like we were doing something. We were doing something so unorthodox, and was one of the coolest parts about it. It was like, yeah, we're just doing something.
Yeah. It was called Motive Society. It was like clothing for go-getters, like very like kind of inspirational, motivational, like get out there, chase your dreams, be everything you can be, and all that kind of stuff. And Team LTD actually started at pretty much the exact same time.
Yep.
Team Living the Dream. They're up in Muskoka, lifestyle brand, all that kind of stuff. And we're like, oh my God, these guys are doing it. We got to compete with them and all that kind of stuff. And it was a really, really neat time, but no direction, no idea what we're doing, all that kind of stuff. So we're like, we got to do something big to go out and promote this thing. So, well, it was your idea. So go ahead.
Yeah. Well, it was. Yeah, we never had mentors, right? We never we had a guy that was actually mentoring us a bit, gave us a little bit of startup cash, but it was just like we had no idea what we were doing. Like we weren't studying this at that point. Like nowadays, entrepreneurship is everywhere. Like at that point, it was out there, but I don't think we knew how to tap into it. So I had this crazy idea. I'm like, man, we need to do something epic. Like we need to do something that's just out of the world, that's going to give us attention and for people to start taking Motive Society more serious outside of our hometown. So I remember going to you. I'm like, I think we need to go to California. We need to launch this. We need to quit our jobs and we need to move to California and do this. And Cal's like, okay, let's think about this some more. Like, how are we going to work this out? And I was like, I don't know yet, but we'll call it the Motivementary. And we took this huge whiteboard and I wrote Motivementary at the top. And I wrote this massive to-do list on everything that we needed to go to California. Hire a videographer, blah, 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 blah. So I think I was definitely the catalyst that pushed you to do that.
100%.
And, but we did it, man. Like we had a deadline. We were like June 2nd or something. We said June 2nd or we're going to leave. And we had about a month and a half to plan this, a couple months. So I work really good on deadlines. So all of a sudden, I'm like, we're going to California. I plan this massive itinerary from where we're going to go, where we're going to stop. I managed to get a hotel sponsor. I got Best Western to give us 50% off all hotels. I literally called Best Western and worked my way up the chains until I got the sponsorship person. And then I also hired a videographer, and I was like, there's got to be someone out there that's willing to come with us that doesn't want to get paid. There's got to be someone out there. So I started going through Kijiji at that point, and I found this guy named Adrian, and I read this whole resume, read what he's done. At the bottom of his little ad, he said, I'm a very spontaneous guy. And I said, okay. So I gave him a call and we're talking. I said, Adrian, yeah, so this is what we're trying to do. We want to do a documentary about, two guys quitting their jobs and going to California, blah, blah, blah. Your ad says you're spontaneous. how spontaneous are you? And he goes, I don't know, like pretty high, like an 8. I was like, do you want to come to California with us and film our adventure? He's like, whoa, okay. Can I have time to think about this? I was like, 100%, man. Take your time. Like get back to me. He calls me back a couple of days later. He's like, I'm down. I'm interested. I'm like, okay, well, before we do this, we got to do like a sample video. So we went to Hamilton. We filmed this little video. He showed me that. I want to make sure he actually knew how to handle a camera and edit. He did that. He was amazing. We got along really well. And then we're like, we're doing this. So we pretty much were like, we're ready to go. We threw a pre-launch party at TJ's in Waterdown. And we got like a live music. We got a merch table. We did a donation thing. And we started raising money to go to California.
Yeah. Yeah. And people came out and they helped us out. And there was a lot of people and all that kind of stuff. And it was incredible. Yeah. Then we did it. We left.
Yeah.
And I think to kind of summarize that trip, we did like 30 interviews with different people, just asking questions about what's your motive, which is almost very similar to kind of, what do you do and all that kind of stuff. So incredible trip. Lots of fun. We went to California, learned how to surf, did a ton of stuff, and it was really eye opening, to do all that kind of stuff. And then we came back, and yeah.
Well, we also ended in a big fight. So me and Cal actually ended in a big fight, and we just didn't really it was mostly my fault again. I allowed something to get in my head. I let a $5 palm reader dictate my life. This is a massive learning step in my life where don't trust people for $5.
Sure.
And we were in Santa Monica, and I remember there was this girl that had this $5 palm reader, a massive line going down the beachfront. When we first got there, I was like, what's this girl about? Supposedly she was on like these big shows like Oprah. She was a well-known palm reader, and she was doing this special that day where she was giving out palm reading for $5. They're usually way more money. So everyone's waiting in line for this girl to get their palm read by her. So we're like, okay, that's way too long of a line. So we went on, did some other things down the pier. We came back later in that evening, and there was like 2 people in line. I was like, okay, this is my chance. Got in line, went into this palm reading. She sat there, looked at my hand for a bit, and she told me, she's like, you're here for some entrepreneurial thing. You're selling something here. And I was like, yeah, like came down with my business partner, my best friend, and we're doing this motivational clothing company. And she's like, okay. She's like, well, I want you to know that like, this is just temporary. This is actually not what you're meant to be doing with your life. This is a stepping stone to something way bigger. And I was like, don't say that. Why are you saying that? Don't get in my head. Imagine someone said that to you.
Yeah.
I just loved your reaction. Don't say that. That's like, not right now.
I'm here in California doing this. Don't say that. And I was like, I remember that got in my head. I was like, what the heck's the point then? And I shut down. I shut down emotionally, dude. Like I walked out to Cal, and like my everything was just shocked. I was like, I was like, what you saying there? I was like, dude, she told me that this is a stepping stone. I'm like, you're like, what? I'm like, yeah, dude, I'm supposed to be doing something bigger with my life.
I'm like, Greg, this is pretty big.
And like after that, we started kind of just getting like little bickering fights and stuff like that. And then it was just like, what are we doing, man? You see the company going this way, I see it going that way. Let's just screw it. And we got in a little fight, and we realized we went on our separate ways. And I remember I was going to leave you in California.
Yeah, you were going to stay in California, and I was going to have to drive home by myself.
Yeah.
It's a
wow.
40.
See, this is the whole untold story.
Oh yeah, we've been keeping this secret for a long time.
Oh wow,
it was crazy.
Interesting.
So
yeah.
I was just gonna live in California. I was just gonna do it. I was just gonna do something I found. Just do it. And again, my mom, she was a very wise voice in my adolescent years, and she said, "Greg, finish what you started. You went to California with Cal. You got to finish it. You got to come home with him." Yeah. And I was like, yeah, you're right. I can't let him drive home alone. So jumped in the truck. I don't think we talked for the first 10 hours. We were just quiet, staring out the windows. And I think the first time we talked was like, you want Subway? Yeah, we'll get Subway.
Again.
Again, we ate so much Subway on that trip. And we when we got back to Waterdown, it was like me and Cal, like we were best friends and like we never fought. Like we were in this like honeymoon stage where everything was just gravy. Like we were best friends, starting this company, like running full speed towards our dreams. In our first fight, we didn't know how to communicate. And we didn't know how to like drop our guards and our egos and really kind of see this for what it was worth. And I think that's what ruined us. What ruined Motive was the fact that we didn't know how to deal with the fight. And when we got home, we just ignored each other. And Cal went on his own thing. We closed down Motive, and I was just like, I did my own thing, and we do best. Like I just ran away. I ran away, and Cal, like you really buckled down on some stuff here in town.
I came back and I couldn't get out of bed for 3 weeks.
Yeah.
I went full depression. Like I was in the dumps. I was gone. My mom would come in and be like, "Everything okay?" I'm like, "Yeah, it's fine. I'm just figuring it out."
Leave me alone, Mom.
Yeah, seriously. And then I had to get 3 jobs. I was so broke, like after that trip, and like I had to pay back debts and all that kind of stuff. And that was probably like one of the hardest times I ever went through was after that trip. But looking back at it, it's all part of the journey. So, and then you went to Montreal.
Yeah. And then I left for Montreal, and we met a guy that was talking to us through Motive, and he messaged me and he's like, "Hey, I love what you guys are doing with Motive and blah, blah, blah." But he didn't know that we had this big fight. So I told him, "Oh, you know what? We're going separate directions. Like I'm kind of doing my own thing. He's doing his own thing." And he said, "Why don't you come to Montreal and visit me? And like we can talk about like I'm in the fitness world, and we could talk about like what you're trying to do." It's like, sure. So I took a trip to Montreal for a weekend. Really liked the city. I liked the feel of it. I was like, it's brand new to me. No one knows me here. Like I can be whoever I want. And I was like, yeah, I'm gonna do it. And I came back on that trip, and I think I worked a serving job for about a month, saved as much money as I could, and then I took a train back out to Montreal. And Montreal, man, is an incredible city. It's the city, I describe it as like you can be whoever you want. It's the most creative city where like people aren't afraid to be themselves there. Like it's the first time that I actually was like there and I just saw like a gay couple walking down the street, and I was like, this is something I'm not used to. Being a small town Ontario, like I was like, man, they're just themselves here. They can wear whatever they want. And it was cool for me. Like Montreal has a massive part of my heart because it's really where I found my more creative side. And when I moved there, like you remember, I was playing music a bit. I think I was playing guitar a little bit in California, but I wasn't by any means like confident enough to like play. And when I went to Montreal, the first thing I said, the thing that I was so scared to do, I was so scared to play my guitar in my hand and sing a song. Like I was singing before that, but like I never knew the guitar. So I'd always have to hire people. I'd always have to like get people to play for me because I didn't have the confidence. And when I got to Montreal, the first night that I moved there, I dropped my bags in my apartment and I went to an open mic. And I remember like sitting up there and I'm like, I have no one to judge me. If I screw up, if I sound horrible, I don't know anybody in this bar. And I remember standing up there and I sang this Luke Bryan song, this country cover, and I forgot most of the lyrics. I was so nervous. My knee was shaking. And then there was a small applause that kind of came up over and I was like, they're probably clapping because I'm done.
Get off the stage.
Yeah, they're like, holy crap, next.
Yeah.
But like, I was like, that little applause to me was like, okay, that felt cool. I'm like, I want to get better at that. And I left that stage and I'm like, I'm going to get better at that. I'm going to get more confident on that stage. And that's when I started just going around Montreal. And I said to myself, like, this is the city I'm going to get the confidence to play on stage. And I started playing on street corners. I started playing on subway stations. I started playing all the open mics around Montreal. And I just started trying to play as much as I possibly could. And in about a year and a half of playing in Montreal, like I was starting to get real confidence on stage, and like I could actually like start to play. And then I started dabbling into songwriting.
And so busking is what they call it. Basically walking around, people give you donations for playing
Yep.
songs for them and all that kind of stuff. So you were bartending when you were out there.
I was doing a whole bunch of different things. I did nightclub promotions. I was a promoter at a nightclub, and I also did telemarketing sales. That was the first time I ever had experience with telemarketing. And then yeah, man, I was just busy, and every night I would go to an open mic, or I'd go to a subway station, and I'd set up my guitar case at this exit, and I just start playing. I start playing, and like got some funny donations. Some people would always give me joints, sandwiches. Everyone thought I was homeless, and I was like, I'm not homeless. I'm actually just trying to get more confident.
Yeah, you're like, what was the most you ever made a night busking?
Honestly, I remember like there was this girl named Allison, and she wasn't homeless, but she was close to it. Like she lived with but she was an incredible musician. And one night we went out and we met when I was busking one night. She's like, you should come with me. She's like, you're not good at asking for money. And she's like, you're good at playing and talking to people, but you suck at asking for money. So she came around she walked around with me with a big jug of money. And I'd play for like maybe 15, 20 people on the side of a street. And then she'd be like, hey, pay the guy, pay the guy. And she'd be like, put some change in. And she would just start racking it up. And that night we made like $250, just like split it up. And I'm like, oh my God, I got to do this every night with you. So we started doing that like every like little bit. Every Friday night we go out together and we make a good amount of money just busking like that. But it was crazy, man. It was just fun. And we met so many cool people. And like it was a special time.
Awesome. So Montreal was awesome. You got to go. I got to check it out. But after Montreal, where are you going next?
So I came home back to Waterdown after that. And for me, like I've always been a very impulsive guy. Like when I get something in my head, like it's hard for me. It's hard for anyone to talk me out of it. So my aunt was actually got diagnosed with brain cancer, and she was going in the hospital she was living in the hospital at that point, and I was living in Montreal. I felt completely selfish. I'm like, my family's going to the hospital every night, and I'm out here just living my life. Like, I'm busking on weekends. I'm playing music. I'm working a bit. I felt so guilty for doing that. So I was talking to my mom one day, and I was like, "How's Paula, my aunt?" And she's like, "Greg, it's not good. Like, she's going downhill fast." And she was like my best, like she was amazing. She was the most welcoming person, and like just so kind-hearted, and she was a dreamer. And like I think in my family she was the one that believed in me the most when it came to like doing something that was unique. She was always saying to me, she said, "Greg, you're made to make people smile. You're made to entertain people." And she was a huge fan of mine. And I was like, I got to get home. And I remember I walked out of my sales job. Like it was about 10:30 in the morning, and I got up from my chair and I walked out. And as I was walking out, the boss was like, "Where are you going?" He's like, "You taking an early lunch?" I'm like, "No, I'm done." He's like, "What do you mean you're done?" I was like, "I quit." He's like, "Why?" I'm like, "Because I got family at home. And my aunt's dying." And I'm like, I'm not gonna do a job right now. And he's like, "So you're not coming back?" I'm like, "No." I got on the subway, went back to my apartment. I packed up my bags, and I left my apartment with rent 2 months left. I still had a contract for another 2 months, and I just left it. Left all my stuff there. And I jumped on a train and went back home. And I remember when I got into Waterdown, I got picked up by my mom and went right to the hospital, and I got to see my aunt. And the first thing I did was right when I walked in the room, I was like, "Get up." Actually, this story, when I was on my way back to my apartment to pack up, there was this homeless guy sitting across from me. This was a huge sign in my life, and he kept laughing at me. And I remember like I kept looking at him like, "Dude, stop looking at me. Like I'm going to punch you." Because he kept looking at me. Finally, he started laughing at me because I'm in the window with my hood up and I'm crying. And he started laughing at me, and I finally turned to him and I looked at him and I started laughing. So we got in this full belly laugh on the train going back to my apartment, and I realized in that moment I'm going home because I'm meant to go and make my family laugh. That homeless guy just made me laugh. Everyone's having a horrible time back home with my aunt. I'm like, I'm gonna go home. I'm gonna make them laugh. I'm gonna be that funny guy that walks in. And I took that to heart. Decided that I wasn't gonna cry in front of my aunt. I walked in the hospital room and I was like, hey, get up. Let's go. We're going out. We're going to grab drinks. We're going to have a party. We're going to have fun. And she's like, Greg, I can't. Like, I just had surgery. And I was like, I don't care. Like, that's not gonna stop me. It's not gonna stop you. And I started pulling her blanket down. And it was just like I was so strong in front of her. But then when I leave the room, I just break down. Um, but she definitely like I held my ground from her, and it was sad. And then we lost her a couple weeks later, and I was like, I can't go back to Montreal now. Like I just felt like my family, my mom lost her sister. It was just a really hard time in my family, and I was like, I can't go back. So I pretty much sold everything at my apartment in Montreal and just stayed back in Waterdown.
Mhm.
And I just took it as a sign. I took it as a sign like I'm meant to be here right now. I don't know what my future is holding me or what's going on, but like I'm just meant to be here with my family right now. So I did that and I stayed there in my hometown. I think I started living with you at that point.
Mhm. Mhm.
And this was coming up on my 25th birthday. And man, like for me, the quarter life crisis, that's real.
Mhm.
Like I, f- I don't think I've ever felt so much pressure, and I felt so far behind. I felt like all my friends had high paying jobs, they're driving new trucks and new cars, and here I am, like, still don't know what I want to do with my life. And that really hit me hard at 25. And I was like living with you at that point. I had bouts with anxiety and depression again. We were starting to kind of drink more. I was starting to drink more, like get back to my old drinking habits, drinking ways, and started, dabbling in some other extracurriculars. And I remember just like getting really down on myself. And I remember when I was living at your place, I walked out to the patio. It was about 2 p.m. I woke up at noon that day, and I was sitting on the porch smoking a cigarette. I was hungover, and I caught a glimpse of myself in the window. And I remember looking at myself like I had really bad, like long, scraggly hair. I had a huge gut. I had a cigarette hanging in my mouth, and I was like, "What are you doing? What are you doing, dude? You're you're killing yourself. Like you were the kid with the potential. You were the kid that had these dreams. You were the kid that everyone thought you were going to do this incredible thing with entertaining, and look at you. You can't even quit smoking. You can't even do that. Like you're literally doing that." And I got in my car and I drove to the doctors. And I told my doc that I had voices in my head. I told them like I had these really negative feelings, and I'm having like partially suicidal thoughts. Like I'm like, I don't know if I don't want to go on anymore like this. Like I'm so tired of this. And he said, "Sounds like you have an anxiety disorder. We're gonna set you up with a psychiatrist, and then you guys can go and talk." So I started joining the psychiatrist in Burlington, and we started talking about my life, started talking about all these things. And he's like, "Man, you're a tricky case." He's like, "I can't put my finger on you." He's like, "One day you walk in here, you're, the most, there's some days you start talking, I can easily diagnose you with a severe anxiety disorder and give you antidepressants. But then there's another times you walk in here where you're just this really creative guy that has no plan."
Mhm.
And that freaking blew me open. I was like, I'm a creative guy with no plan. And I told him, like, I don't want to take medication or anything. Like, so he said to me, like, let's try antidepressants. And I was like, okay, fine. I'll try them for 2 weeks just to kind of prove to myself that, like, I don't want to do this. So he gave me the pills, went home. For the next week, still couldn't get out of bed. I was a freaking zombie. I was just like, my personality got totally cut away from me. I was tired all the time, lethargic. I took these pills back to him. I was like, I put them on his desk. I was like, nope, I'm not taking these. What other options do you have? And he's like, well, we have an all natural stress reliever you can take, or you can start looking into yoga and meditation. So he introduced me to meditation on that day. And he said, just do it for 10 minutes a day or whatever. And I started after that. It was the massive struggle, but I started to every morning sit down for 10 minutes or whatever and just meditate. Started to make that a habit in my life. And that actually started to help. And Then a couple weeks later, I got hit with the hernia surgery. And I remember I was in the shower and I felt this lump. And obviously my mind goes to the worst case scenario. And I was like, oh crap, I have testicular cancer. So I went to the doctor and he told me that no, it's just a hernia. So I got the hernia surgery done, and then I was bedridden for 6 weeks. So here I am, just had some conversation with a psychiatrist about like anxiety, about that I can't really, I don't want to be alone right now. And now I'm in bed for 6 weeks. That didn't do well for me. So I'm sitting there and I'm just scrolling through the phone, scrolling through the internet. I was like, I gotta run. I gotta go again. I gotta leave. I can't be in my hometown anymore. So I started researching like jobs and came across the Cayman Islands. And I think I watched Cocktails with Tom Cruise on Netflix and how he was a bartender in Jamaica. I was like, yep, that's what I want to do. And I found a job. I got the interview. I nailed the interview, I thought. And then they're like, yeah, we'll let you know in a couple weeks if you got the job. So I'm just like every day, like, come on, let's go.
It was a bartending gig.
Bartending.
Came out at
In
a
the Cayman
resort or
Islands.
something like that.
At Margaritaville in the Cayman
Margaritaville.
Islands.
Okay.
And yeah, they kind of got back to me, and I didn't hear back from them for about 2 weeks to a month. So I was like, whatever, didn't get the job. So at that point, I was like, I need to figure something out because I'm already leaving. I've already made up in my head that I'm leaving my hometown. So I actually accepted a job to sell alarm systems in Kamloops, BC. My buddy was doing that out west, and he's like, come sell for me. I was like, done. So I had a going away party at Bo's Sports Pub, and everyone thought I was leaving for BC. So here we are getting drunk on a Friday night, having some fun. I wake up the next morning. I go to Gino's because I was craving some pizza. And I was sitting there eating my pizza. My phone rings. And this girl answers. She's like, hey, Greg, like, we haven't heard back from you about the Cayman Islands job. Like, do you not want it? I was like, what are you talking about? And she's like, yeah, we want you. Like, we want you to come work here. And I was like, I never got any emails from you. That turns out they spelled my email wrong. So then all the emails came popping up in my inbox. And they're like, yeah, Greg, we want you. When can you start? So at that very moment, my whole life just went from thought I was going to BC.
Yeah.
I accepted the job in the Cayman Islands.
Cool.
2 weeks later, I was living on the islands.
Wow. That's incredible. Jesus. How long were you at the Cayman Islands for?
4 months.
4 months. Okay.
Yep.
Unreal. So you're bartending, doing events. Were you playing any music there at that
Yep.
time? Or okay.
Yeah, I was playing music, but it was actually a lot harder to play music there because you needed like a permit.
Okay.
You needed an entertainment permit, which I didn't know. I thought I could just go there and start playing gigs. Turns out when I got there, it was much harder to do. So that kind of put me into a little bit of a roadblock because they really wanted local Caymanians to play. But I just kept playing all the open mics. It was the most incredible place to play. Like, you're living on an island, and I'd go and play these little island bars, and it was fun. A bunch of tourists would come out there. I was starting to get known as the country guy on island. I'd go and I'd play Luke Combs songs. I'd play all these like different country tunes. And yeah, I was just kind of getting known as the country guy.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And then now country music is now
Yeah.
kind of, how did that all come about? So you're playing shows and gigs and all that kind of stuff. And then,
So country music for me, I always loved it. Always grew up listening to country music, but like it was never really believing in myself that I could ever do music as something because, you know, I just feel that I grew up in a family that, you know, was safer. They had a job for a long time and they kind of showed me they're like, you know, get a consistent income coming in. So for me, music was like, I don't even know how to make money off this. Like, I don't even know what to do. So I never really thought of doing music. Like, it was never a dream of mine to be a musician. It was more, my dream was always to be on a stage. And like, you know, when you go back to the motivational speaking days and the stuff like after the car crash, I wanted to be a speaker, but my vision growing up was I always saw myself on a stage. I just didn't know what I was doing on that stage. I didn't know if I was playing music, if I was a comedian, if I was acting, if I was doing speaking, but I would always dream about a theater. I always dream about like stage. So when I got into the Cayman Islands, I started playing more and more. And then I was singing at an open mic at this bar called Calico Jack's. And I remember I was just like playing like Hurricane by Luke Combs. And this girl walked up to me after my song and she's like, "Hey, I don't mean to be rude, but like, what are you doing here?" She's like, "You're good. Like, you got a good voice. Like, you're really good. Like, why aren't you doing music in a bigger city like LA or Nashville?" And I was like, "Oh, I'm not good. I'm not good enough for that." She's like, "No, you are." She's like, "I live in Nashville. You should come and visit me for 10 days. I'll show you around and that kind of stuff." And I was like, I had a couple of drinks at that point. I was like, whatever, I'll go. And I went home that night, went on my computer, and I booked a trip to Nashville a month later. And I was going to go for 10 days. So, kind of how it worked out was when you go to the Cayman Islands, you do a 3-month work permit. So, I wanted to end my work permit, and my plan was to go to Nashville for 10 days and then go back to the Cayman Islands and get a new job on the islands because the other one wasn't working out, wasn't making as much money as I would have liked. So, I wanted to go to a different bar. And I had interviews set up when I went home. So, I went off to Nashville. And I actually invited my parents to come down with me because we both have never been to Nashville before. So they drove down from Waterdown, and we met in Nashville. And they went to the airport, picked me up at the airport. I come off the airport, beach hair. I'm in a tank top. I have a nice tan. I'm in beach shorts. I'm like, do not look like I'm ready for Nashville. So for the first 4 days, we did every little tourist thing we could do. We went to the Grand Ole Opry, the Country Music Hall of Fame. We went drinking on Broadway. The first beer I had was at Tootsie's Orchid Lounge, which is the most famous bar in Nashville. And I was like, "Okay, we got to go to Tootsie's." So we did all these like little events for the first 3 days. And then as we were walking around Second Avenue, it was like, so Second Avenue is just off Broadway. The main drag is Broadway. That's where you hear the 24/7 music. That's where people play music from 10 a.m. all the way to 2 a.m. There's levels and levels. So we're walking around, we're looking at the gift shops, and I turn to my mom, I go, "Mom, like my brain, like my head, it's like swimming right now." Like she knows when I start to get like this, like I get a little anxious. She said, "Go for a walk." She said, "Go for a walk and clear your head." I was like, "Yeah, like I need to do that." I'm like, I'm gonna go back to the hotel and nap. And then like it was their last night in Nashville. And I was like, so my plan was to go back to the hotel and nap, and then I was gonna meet them for dinner. And then we were gonna like have a nice night out. And then I was going to take on Nashville for the next 6 days alone. So I went home and I was walking back to the shuttle to the hotel. I heard this voice coming from a bar, and they had the speakers outside of the bar or the restaurant, and they had the most incredible girl voice I've ever heard in my life. And I was like, what is that? I got to see her play. So I walked into this bar. There's like 4 people in it. There's this young girl on stage playing piano and singing. I was mesmerized. I was like, this is like, it felt like out of a movie. She had the lights coming down on her, and I was just sitting there. And I pulled the seat up at the bar, and to my luck, it was 2-for-1 beers that day. So I go to the bartender. I was like, "I'll take 2." So I'm sitting there drinking a couple of beers, just listening to this girl play. Started talking with the bartender. Her name was Jen. And we started kind of talking about life and that kind of stuff. She's like, "What brings you to Nashville?" I was like, "Oh, I'm actually living in the Cayman Islands. I'm just here for 10 days, just kind of taking in the city." And she's like, "Oh, amazing. Like, welcome." I was like, "Yeah, thank you." So, the beer started flowing pretty easily at that time. And then when she went to the back to get some limes, the girl finished on stage. So now it was just a song playing on the radio. And I was singing the song that was playing on the radio. And Jen, the bartender, was like, "Oh, are you a singer?" And I was like, No, I'm not really a singer. Like, I sing a little bit, but by no means a singer." And she was just like, "Well, listen, if you're still here in about an hour, my friends are coming to play because they were the next performers and they started at 6. And I was like, "I doubt I'll be here. It's like 5 o'clock right now. I'm getting pretty tired." And she's like, "Okay, well, whatever." So all of a sudden, like, I stayed there. We were talking about life, talking about her whole story, and just, it was pretty much me and her in the bar. And then Trey and the two guys came in to play the bar, and I started watching them play. Blown away. I was like, Nashville is just like, this is what people are talking about. One of the most talented musicians in the world, they're there. Like, everyone can play. The bartender serving you that beer can probably write a better song than most people in America. Like, that showed in that little time span, I was blown away by they went up and they just started melting people's faces. And I was like, whoa. So I'm watching Trey play, and Jen goes to me, do you want to sing a song? I was like, no, I'm good. I'm pretty drunk. Like, I don't want to play. She's like, well, look, I'm good friends with Trey. Like, I can literally get him off the stage in a quarter of a second. If I tell him that I have a free shot for him, he'll come running. I was like, she asked me one more time. She's like, you want to play? Play a song. Play us a tune. I was like, fine. Okay. So I went up on stage, and she goes, Trey, come down here. I got a Jameson shot for you. So Trey passes me guitar, and I walk up, and I sit in his bar stool. And I'm sitting up there, and I'm looking around, and it's this little hookah bar in Nashville, this small bar. There's maybe like 10 people in it. And I take his guitar, and I'm playing it, and I freaking drew a blank. I couldn't remember anything. I couldn't remember any songs, any chords. I was looking at this guitar. I was like, what am I going to play? So I start playing. The only song I can think about playing is a 90s hip hop song called No Diggity. And I started playing No Diggity.
Yeah.
And Jen starts pulling out the phone and starts filming me. She's like, I want to film your first song in Nashville. So I start playing this song, and she's just like filming me, and I start getting into it, and I start singing like No Diggity, and I moved into No Scrubs, and I started doing this whole 90s melody, this 90s, like all these songs. And she comes off, I come off stage, she's like, dude, that was incredible. Like, you have a good voice. Why aren't you living here? I was like, I don't know, like I'm Canadian. I don't know how to freaking live in Nashville. And she's like, man, she's like, you're good. Like, you like, if you ever come back here and you want to play here, like, let me know you're coming back, and I'll give you a gig on Sunday nights. I'll give you a gig on Sunday night from 8 to 11. I was like, I appreciate that. Thank you. Like, if I ever come back, I'll definitely call you, Jen, and say, hey, I'm in town. So as I'm walking back to the hotel, I was like, okay, what just happened? Did I just book a show in Nashville? And I was like, okay, if I can book a show in Nashville in 4 days, what could I do in 3 months? And I went home, I told my parents about it. They were like, wow, that's so cool. Like, you got a Nashville show. Like, yeah, sweet. You're drunk. I am drunk, but whatever. I'm having fun.
Yeah.
So we went for dinner that night, and we're sitting at the Nashville Palace, and we're sitting there at the bar, and it's like, we're all lined up again at the bar. We're having a couple drinks, we're having food, and I was sitting next to my mom, and I remember turning to her, and she said something to me, and she looks over at me, and she knows I'm in my head. She goes, you're not going back, are you? I was like, what do you mean? She's like, you're not going back to the Cayman Islands. She's like, you want to stay here, don't you? I was like, I do, Mom. I'm like, I just feel like that was a sign today that I'm supposed to be in Nashville. And she's like, yeah, I think you are meant to be here. She's like, I want you to, she's like, and then she said 3 words to me. She said, get to work. I was like, will do. And I freaking got up the next morning, I canceled my flight back to the Cayman Islands, and I stayed in Nashville. I booked a hostel for 2 weeks, and then started running low on money. Person that gave me the room, the next room, a couch, was Jen, the bartender. She let me stay in her couch for a month.
Couch surfing.
Yep. Couch surfing. Yeah. Started couch surfing for 2 months. And then Trey gave me a place to sleep, the guy that gave me the first song. So I pretty much just was making up as I went when I moved to Nashville. And man, I never had a dream of living in Nashville. It just kind of all came flashing forward. I was like, I'm just going to take it and go.
Yeah.
Well, so fast forward to today, because obviously you've done a lot of shows since then. So let's talk about some of the shows. Let's talk about what it takes to perform in large groups of crowds, because I'm sure that's obviously the biggest things that a lot of people worry about, or the biggest fear that sets in before they even say anything in front of the mic. So walk us through, like obviously you've had such a natural gifted thing when it comes to being in large groups of people,
Mhm.
being on front of stage. What advice can you give to people that would that want to be country singer, anything?
I think it's knowing yourself. I think it's knowing what you want to sing about and speak about. I think for me, it was just like, yeah, I've been through a whole journey, and that's the thing. Like, it's hard for me to, kind of take everything and so much impulsivity and spit it out into like a flow, because there's been so many moving parts.
Mhm.
But over the years, I've just learned that it's about knowing. It's about knowing what you want to speak about and knowing what you like, being authentic. And I think for me, country music was always a part of me, but like it was also a very false self. I realized now that the country music industry is not as much of what I want to be in. I've grown so much since Nashville, and I've grown, and I know that I want something deeper. I want a deeper understanding of, like, I want to speak, I want to share my stories, I want to inspire people that have a dream. I want to inspire people to try new things. And I just really want to just, yeah, like, don't waste your 20s. Don't waste your 20s. Like, and I love what you guys ask is like, what would you change? I wouldn't change much. I wish that I got to understand a little bit more about my brain and my ADHD and stuff like that, and realizing that life is so precious. And I would just say to people that want to be creatives and entrepreneurs and musicians, man, just figure out what you want to write about. And I got great advice from Paul Brandt. And he said to me, don't ever write a song that you think people are going to love. Write music that you love and let your fan base grow. Like, it might start small, it might start very small, but you'd much rather be known for a song that you wrote from your heart rather than writing a song about a beer drinking that gets really famous and that follows you for the rest of your life. Like, write the music that you want, and ultimately, you just got to be patient. You got to wait for your turn.
Cool. So what is everything that you're doing now today, other than performing great music?
Yeah, for me, it's just like I'm living out west now. I'm living out in Strathmore, and I think for the last 10 years, I've just been developing my story. And I think for me, I've battled with a lot of impulsivity, as you can tell through this episode. It's a lot of like moving around, and it's exhausting. It's exhausting always being on the run. And November 27th, 2018 was the last time I ever played in Nashville. And I walked away from Nashville because I got to a point where I played 210 shows that year. I was tired. I was tired of playing to drunk people every night. I was tired of playing country covers. I wanted more. And I wanted more fulfillment. And I remember looking out in the audience and I was like, I'm tired of playing to drunk people. And I went home in the Christmas of 2018, and I had this massive this epiphany, and I was like, this is what I'm not meant to do. I'm meant to go, and I want to go speak. I want to go speak at high schools. I want to go share my story. And I got hired by a Canadian charity called Live Different. And I went across Canada speaking at 90 high schools. And we reached over 30,000 students with my story of how I moved to Nashville on a whim, and just my story of kind of hope and resiliency that, like, don't give up. Like, don't give up. Like, it's going to be rocky. There's going to be a lot of roadblocks, but it's about maneuvering around them. And that's what I talked about. And then when I came home from that, it was just like, boom, pandemic hit. I had no plan B. I felt again like I just absolutely failed, that I've been doing music for the last 5 years and I don't know what I want to do. So I moved out west. And, because of my song 16 Sticks. 16 Sticks was a song that brought me out west to perform at a fundraiser. And I went out there and I realized that I actually love the Western culture. I love the people out there. I love what it stands for. And I really found myself a nice home out there. And for the first time in a long time, I actually do feel like I can see myself in Alberta for a long time. And
And
it
sorry,
feels
so
good.
you're doing motivational speaking now.
I'm doing music. I'm doing
okay.
speaking. I'm working on a keynote speech. I want to start getting back into schools. I want to start getting back into just creating a performance that will weave in my whole story and kind of take you on a journey throughout my life. And then I actually want to sing original songs that I wrote during those times in my life. So it's going to be about an hour to hour and a half show talking about all like the bunch of songs. And that's what I really want to do. That's the thing that brings me alive. Like that, I just want to be able to kind of tell my stories and sing my songs.
Mhm.
It's funny too because I'm actively listening, and you have been definitely taking this show, so I appreciate it, Greg. And it's funny how, not funny I guess, but I don't want you to take it the wrong way. But it's just funny how the from the palm reading
Yeah.
of from obviously when that was in California to Motive Society being like the stepping stone. I wonder if it was the stepping stone of being that motivational speaker, like the Tony Robbins that you said that you watched go on Oprah and like
Yeah.
that next version of you. But it's good that you have this story that you went through of all the trials and errors and meeting new people. And I'm sure, your contact list and your phone's probably more
Yeah.
than
I've changed my phone so many times though.
yeah, exactly. But it's great to hear your story and the challenges that you've gone through to find that true passion. Whether you were that kid in high school that you didn't necessarily know what to
Yeah.
make of yourself, and here you are today, and it looks like you got a really great great vision, great goal, and definitely proud of you for that. And I'm sure Cal is too, but unfortunately, this podcast has certainly been our longest one so far. So thank you for
Wanted
that.
to set the record.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
obviously every podcast must come to an end. But one thing we love asking every guest before we end is if you give yourself 20-year-old advice, what would it be?
Own your story.
Cool.
Own you, man. And I think for me, it's like we're all so unique in our own ways, and there's no one that's like us. There's no one that has the same past and the same stories and the same upbringing, the same interests and the passions. For me, for so long, I want to fit in. I always want to try and fit into a mold, into a crowd, and I had a very hard time embracing who I was. I'm a goofy, I'm a crazy dude that likes to move around. I love to have a life of adventure. I don't like mediocrity or that. It took me a long time for me to own that and to embrace my uniqueness and what makes me different. And if there's anyone out there that's listening to this podcast this whole time, and I hope that whatever they're going through, like embrace that, embrace your quirks, and embrace what makes you different, and just yeah, just never give up on that. And if I got that message when I was younger, I don't know what would have happened, but I needed that. I needed that message when I was younger. Embrace who you are, and yeah, embrace what makes you different.
Wow. And what goals do you have for the next 5 to 10 years?
If I told you, it'd be another hour.
Yeah, well, that's good. I mean, I'm sure you got a lot of aspirations, and we look forward to seeing your journey and your ride that you have for the next 10 years. I'm sure the last 10 years was quite the ride itself. So
Absolutely. Appreciate that, guys.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me on.
And then if anybody wants to reach out to you, Greg, find out about your story, talk to you. You quit drinking for almost 2 years now.
Yep.
You've done a program called 75 Hard, which is like an incredible program that I also did that you influenced me to do and absolutely changed my life. And I thank you very much for that. It's been a massive changer for me. If anyone out there is having a hard time drinking, whatever it may be, reach out to Greg. He can definitely help you out with that. But if people need to reach out to you, what's the best way to touch base?
Yeah, Greg Ryder Official on Instagram, gregryder.com. And yeah, my goals are just to keep packaging that story, keep getting it tighter. And, it's all over the place right now because it's a long-winded thing. But I want to really tighten my story into an hour and a half and really an hour to a presentation and be able to speak about it. So if there's anyone that wants me to come speak or whatever, I'm down. I want to get up as many stages as I can, and hopefully my story can help someone that was as lost as I was.
Awesome.
wow. Well, Greg, thank you so much for being part of today's podcast.
Yep.
And to everyone listening, if you enjoyed it, please hit the like button and hit subscribe so you don't miss out on any future content. And if you'd like to see some sort of careers on here, don't hesitate to comment them down below. And we will certainly catch you in the next episode. See you guys.
Later.
Hey,
Oh my
that was
God, we
great.
set a record, baby. We're always setting records.